Today, on March the 7th, the U.S. Senate finally, unanimously, with no opposition, unanimously, with no opposition, unanimously, with no opposition, the United States Senate finally passes America's first anti-lynching bill. I didn't come on here tonight to celebrate because there's nothing to celebrate. Nobody has yet been convicted under this new federal anti-lynching bill. I have not yet had the opportunity to read the full contents of this new federal anti-lynching bill. I don't know how far-reaching this new federal anti-lynching bill is going to be. I do know that it imposes a maximum sentence of 30 years, which I have a problem with, because if you lynch a black person, why is the maximum sentence 30 years? If you lynch a black person, why is the maximum sentence 30 years? If you lynch a black person, why is the maximum sentence 30 years? So I have a problem with that. And the other thing that I have a problem with, just looking at this bill on the surface, is I'm almost certain that police who lynch black people in the line of duty will not be prosecuted according to the new Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. Does this include police who lynch black people while they are on the job? Or is this only for civilians who lynch black people while they are on the job? That's a question I have. Another question I have, is this law specifically for black people? Or is it another multicultural law that will be used to prosecute people who lynch rainbow gang members or women or immigrants? Is this law going to be used for black people, or is it a law that every other so-called minority group is going to look to use to their benefit? That's a question that I have. But with that being said, until I get a chance to read the full text of the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill, I will reserve judgment. I did go on congress.gov today. I did go on congress.gov today. I did go on congress.gov today, and I tried to find the full bill, the full text, and I couldn't find anything in full text regarding the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. So maybe it'll come out later this week, but I want to read the full text to find out how much meat, how much power, how much scope this law really has. Because the House of Representatives had to rewrite the law several times. The Congressional Black Caucus had to rewrite the law several times. So I'm very interested in seeing just what is included and what is not included under the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill as a prosecutorial offense. I want to know what that is. Putting that to the side, I do want to say that Emmett Till, rest in paradise, and his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, rest in paradise. And every African that has ever been lynched in this country, not just during the 245 years that America has been in existence, but the nearly 200 years before that, when we had just had 13 colonies in territories that's almost 200 years of lynching right there. Thousands of Africans. We know there's about 10,000 documented lynchings. That doesn't even include the undocumented lynchings. And we know that Queen Mother Ida B. Wells, born in Mississippi, lived in Memphis, but ultimately relocated to Chicago. She did more to expose, uncover, and fight against lynch law than any African in the history of this country. I want to say Queen Mother Ida B. Wells, who's buried in Chicago, who lived in Chicago, who married the owner of the Chicago Defender, I believe, and bore his children. She did more to fight against the lynchings of African people more than any other leader in the history of the United States. So while we talk about the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act of 2022, while we talk about the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act of 2022, let us remember the Queen Mother. Let us remember Ida B. Wells. This is the culmination of her work. She was the first one and the main one to investigate, to chronicle, to report, and to fight for justice for those Africans who were lynched back during Reconstruction and since that time. So Ida B. Wells, you're with the ancestors at this time, and we say thank you, because this is really the culmination of Ida B. Wells's work, who was one of the first Africans to try to make lynching a federal offense in this country. Emmett Till, Mamie Till Mobley, we'll never forget them and what they went through. We'll never forget them and what they went through. All the thousands of black men lynched and castrated. The sister Mary Turner in Georgia, who had her baby cut out of her and was lynched after they lynched her husband. And we have thousands of stories. James Byrd, who was lynched, drugged to his death in Jasper, Texas. We have so many stories that we can talk about when we deal with this lynching. But I do want to say this. I was critical of the Congressional Black Caucus in my lives that I did on Saturday and Sunday, yesterday and the day before. And I don't take back anything I said. But credit has to be given where credit is due. Chicago Congressman Bobby Rush was the author of the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. Chicago Congressman Bobby Rush was the author of the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. Chicago Congressman Bobby Rush was the author of the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. So to my Chicago family and to my Illinois family, to my Chicago family and to my Illinois family, we want to say thank you, because not only was this act named after a Chicago African, Emmett Till, this act was written by a Chicago African, Congressman Bobby Rush, and the movement and the crusade against lynching was made prominent by a Chicago African and Ida B. Wells. So this movement to make lynching a federal crime was started by Ida B. Wells, gained momentum with the martyrdom of Emmett Till, and was written as a bill by Congressman Bobby Rush, So we all owe Chicago some kudos today. We all owe Chicago some kudos today. We all owe Chicago some kudos today. And to my Chicago Africans, I know some of you take issue with Congressman Bobby Rush. I've heard the rumors. Some people say he knew what was going to happen to Fred Hampton, December of 1969. And he made it a point to not be in the House. We don't know that for sure. It's speculation. And I would never hold him to that accusation without sufficient evidence. I was not there. But what I can say is without that brother putting this bill forward, no matter how weak the bill might be, the fact that he stuck with it despite multiple attempts by the U.S. Senate to shut him and the Congressional Black Caucus down as an elder, Chicago. I think y'all need to throw that elder some sort of a retirement party. He will not be running for Congress again. He will not be running for Congress again. From what I understand, Congressman Bobby Rush will not be running for Congress again. And for him to get this done on his way out the door, in my opinion, it doesn't undo all the things that he probably should have done while he served in the U.S. Congress. But without question, brothers and sisters, without question, we have to honor him and give him his roses while he's still on this earth, because it was Bobby Rush who wrote that bill, and it was Bobby Rush who stuck with that bill. And now that he's resigning from his congressional seat, he leaves with the legacy of knowing that he got the first ever anti-lynching bill passed in American history. Give that brother his kudos, Chicago. Give that brother his kudos, Chicago. Now, let me say this. I'm having a hard time not taking a little bit of credit for this. I'm having a very hard time not taking a little bit of credit for this. And of course, to God goes the glory. But looking at the history of this bill and the history of lynching in this country and the consistent history of the United States government refusing to make the lynching of Black people a federal crime, I find it highly coincidental. I find it highly coincidental that I do a live on Saturday talking about the Congressional Black Caucus, breaking down President Biden's State of the Union address, underscoring the fact that President Biden didn't mention Black people a single time on his State of the Union address. He didn't mention the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. He didn't mention the George Floyd police accountability bill. He didn't mention police brutality, gentrification, mass incarceration, miseducation, economic genocide. Joe Biden completely ignored Black people on Monday's State of the Union address. And then I reviewed his Black History Month program at the White House on February the 28th. So I reviewed his State of the Union speech, and then we reviewed his February 28th White House Black History Month program. That was Saturday. And then I came back on Sunday, yesterday, and we did a thorough analysis of the 20 senior members of the Congressional Black Caucus. We talked about their ineffectiveness. We've talked about their duration in Congress. We've talked about their age, respectfully, that is. respectfully, that is, because we respect our elders. And I'm having a hard time believing that live I did on the State of the Union address on Saturday and that live I did yesterday on the Congressional Black Caucus, I'm having a hard time believing that somebody didn't make a phone call. I'm having a hard time believing that somebody didn't make a phone call. I think somebody called the president. I think somebody called the president and said, Ifa Tunde is planning political revolution for the Tuesday, November the 8th, 2022 elections. That Prince of Pan-Africanism is planning a coup d'etat of the Congressional Black Caucus on Tuesday, November the 8th. So President Biden, you have a decision to make. You can pick up the phone and call the president of the Senate and tell him to let all U.S. senators know that the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill will be approved by unanimous vote tomorrow, or you will not sign any of the Senate's bills into law. Because President Biden, if you do not start making the Congressional Black Caucus look like they are relevant, President Biden, if you do not start making the Congressional Black Caucus look like they are relevant, that Bishop Turner National Independent Black Political Movement, they are looking to replace most of the Congressional Black Caucus. And if they do that, President Biden, if a bunch of young people take over for those old people in the U.S. Congress, your last 2 years as President of the United States will be a living hell. So President Biden, they are planning a legal coup d'etat on the November elections. Dr. Umar is the most prominent black scholar, not only in this country, but on this planet. He has more followers than any other scholar. He's more popular than any other scholar. And if he leads a movement to motivate young radicals to run for the congressional seat in their state, we fear that a lot of the old black congressional congressmen and women who we control will be ousted. And if they are ousted, you're going to have to deal with a lot of young, radical, courageous, idealistic blacks. And if that happens in November, your last 2 years as President of the United States will be difficult for you. Those young black congressmen and women, they are not going to listen to you. They're going to fight you tooth and nail. They're going to boycott you. They're going to protest you. They're going to expose you. So if you want to make sure you don't have no problems out of black America for your last 2 years, President Biden, if you want to make sure that your last 2 years as president are peaceful and calm and that you don't get no negative energy from black America, you better pick up the phone and call the U.S. Senate right now. You better pick up the phone and call your friends in the U.S. Senate right now and tell them that tomorrow, not Tuesday, not Wednesday, not Thursday, not Friday, tomorrow, you all are going to pass the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill because you are not going to let Dr. Umar and that Bishop Turner political movement and all these young black radicals who are threatening to replace our black bourgeoisies in the Congressional Black Caucus. You are not going to cost me my legacy as president of these United States. So I don't care what you're going to do, but that bill better pass the U.S. Senate tomorrow. Somebody made a phone call, brothers and sisters. Somebody watching my live this past weekend made a phone call to the president. If you want me to believe that bill getting passed today had nothing to do with my live yesterday, if you want me to believe that bill getting passed today had nothing to do with my live on Saturday, I'm not going to believe you. Somebody in DC is watching me closely. Somebody on the CBC is watching me closely. Think about it, brothers and sisters. What is the likelihood that the U.S. Senate, who has rejected and filibustered and slandered this anti-lynching bill for decades, all of a sudden, the day after my live, the bill gets passed unanimously. Every senator voted for the bill. When the hell does that happen in this country? When in this country does every senator vote unanimously for something benefiting black people? It doesn't happen. And I want to give kudos to the Congressional Black Caucus because they stood with Bobby Rush on this. So Queen Mother Eleanor Holmes Norton, Queen Mother Maxine Waters, Baba Sanford Bishop, Baba James Clyburn, Sister Eddie Bernice Johnson, of course, Congressman Bobby Rush, Congressman Robert Scott, Congressman Benny Thompson, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Congressman Danny Davis, also from Chicago, Congressman Gregory Meeks, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Congressman David Scott, Congressman George Butterfield, Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver, Congressman Al Greer, Congresswoman Gwen Moore, Congresswoman Yvette Clark, Congressman Hank Johnson, Congressman Andre Carson, and those are just the 20 senior members. There's 37 others, and we want to give them their kudos today. So the Congressional Black Caucus, I want to give you your kudos today for standing by Bobby Rush and forcing this through. Credit must be given where credit is due, but it should not have taken 2 Dr. Umar exposés. It should not have taken 2 Dr. Umar exposés. It should not have taken 2 Dr. Umar exposés to get this thing passed. To the Congressional Black Caucus, we appreciate that, but it's not enough. We thank you, but it's not enough. What is the status of the George Floyd police reform bill? What is the status of the George Floyd police reform bill? Because most black people in this country are not lynched by civilians. They are lynched by police. Most black people in this country are not lynched by civilians. They are lynched by police. Most black people in this country are not lynched by civilians. They're lynched by police. So until the George Floyd Police Accountability Act is passed by the Congress and signed by the president, it's going to be difficult for us to treat this as any real victory. Now, let me also say that let's go over the George Floyd Act. Let's go over the George Floyd Act. Well, you know what? Hold on. Let me look up the Emmett Till Act. Maybe I could get the language. Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. Okay. What does it call for? It's not on there. All right. So we're going to do George Floyd. Okay. Let's briefly talk about why the George Floyd Police Act is getting so much pushback in the Senate. Number one, the president, during his State of the Union address, said, don't defund the police, give them more money. Joe Biden, by saying that, stiffened resistance to the George Floyd anti-lynching bill being put through Congress. So Joe Biden, that was a very racist comment. It was a very disrespectful, slick, and undermining comment you made, sir. Okay, so you're the same Joe Biden who put that 1994 Bill Clinton crime bill in on us. So let's look at what the George Floyd bill is calling for. Grant power to the Justice Department Civil Rights Division to issue subpoenas to police departments as part of pattern or practice investigation into whether there has been a pattern and practice of bias or misconduct by the department. Let's rate that on a scale of 1 to 10. Grant power to the Justice Department Civil Rights Division to issue subpoenas to police departments as part of pattern or practice investigations into whether there has been a pattern and practice of bias or misconduct by the department. I'll give that a 4. That's kind of weak. That's very general. You're giving discretion to the Justice Department. You're not requiring anything. I'm going to give that a 4. That's kind of weak. Let's go to the next one. Provide grants for state attorney generals to create an independent process to investigate misconduct or excessive use of force by the police. I'm going to give that a 4. That's weak. Why are you giving grants to state attorney generals? Why are you providing grants? See, if you're providing a grant, that means it's optional. Why is that not mandatory? See, when you say provide grants to state attorney generals to create an independent process to investigate misconduct or excessive use of force, why are you giving out grants? That means you're only going to give out some money so some state attorney generals can investigate misconduct or excessive force. That should not be a grant. That should be a required program, a required provision of the George Floyd Police Act, and it should be funded for all states. Why are you giving out grants? They can apply for a grant. Why does a state attorney general have to apply to the feds for a grant to investigate police misconduct or excessive force? I don't like that. That's very weak. Why is that a granted provision, which means it's optional? Why is it not mandatory? Why is it not mandatory that the Department of Justice is going to fund all 50 states and require them to investigate police misconduct and excessive force? So that's 2 weak provisions right there, 2 weak ones. Let's go to number 3. And we're going to do the same thing with the Emmett Till bill once I get the full bill. We're going to go through the Emmett Till bill also once I get the full bill. Number 3, establish a federal registry of police misconduct complaints and disciplinary actions. A federal registry of police misconduct complaints and disciplinary actions. That's not a bad thing, but it doesn't go far enough. So once the feds collect all these police brutality reports, what are you all going to do with the reports? Just because you're collecting data on police brutality, just because you're collecting data on police misconduct, doesn't mean you're going to do anything about it. So I'm going to give that a 3. On a scale of 1 to 10, I haven't given anything a 5 or greater yet. Let's continue. Enhance accountability for police officers who commit misconduct by restricting the application of qualified immunity doctrine for local and state officers, and by changing the intent element of the federal criminal offense of deprivation of rights under color of law, which has been used to prosecute police for misconduct, from willfully to knowingly or with reckless disregard. Okay, let me read this again. Enhance the accountability for police officers who commit misconduct by restricting the application of qualified immunity doctrine for local and state officers, and by changing the intent element of federal criminal offenses, which has been used to prosecute police, from willfully to knowingly or with reckless disregard. So here's what they're saying, brothers and sisters. Police are protected from something known as qualified immunity. It is a legal principle that grants government officials performing discretionary functions immunity from civil suit unless the plaintiff can show that the police officer violated clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. So qualified immunity is the statute that makes it difficult for police to be held accountable, brothers and sisters. But so they're saying downgrade the standard of proof from willfully, right? Officer Derek Chauvin, did he willfully choke out our brother George Floyd? Rest in peace. Or did he knowingly or with reckless disregard do it? So they want to move the standard of burden down from willfully, which is a very high burden. You got to prove that the police officer willfully did this. So they're saying downgrade it from willfully to knowingly or with reckless disregard. Okay? So I like that part, but it doesn't go far enough. Because in my opinion, why are we restricting the application of qualified immunity instead of eliminating qualified immunity? Why are we restricting qualified immunity instead of eliminating qualified immunity? I don't want to restrict qualified immunity because that still gives the prosecutor discretion. It still gives the judge discretion. It still gives the system discretion. I don't want to restrict qualified immunity. I want to get rid of it. Okay? But I will give y'all a 5 on that. I'm going to give you a 5 on the qualified immunity provision. Let's go to the next one. I'm reading the provisions of the George Floyd Police Accountability Act. Although the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill was approved today due to my influence over the past weekend, we don't have the language of that law yet. So instead, I'm going over the language of the George Floyd Police Accountability Bill. So the next provision says require federal police officers to have body-worn cameras. Okay. That's not enough. Police are already wearing cameras. They're killing us with the cameras on. So yes, make the federal police wear a camera, but that's not enough because they're killing us even with the cameras playing. They're turning the cameras off. How about automatic prosecution of any police officer who turns off his camera while in the line of duty? We're going to call it obstruction of justice. Any police officer that turns off their camera in the line of duty, especially when dealing with black people, will be charged with obstruction of justice and will be fired from their job. That's what we want. That's what we want. If you turn off the body cam, you will be fired. You cannot be rehired by any other police force. That's another important point, brothers and sisters. That's another important point, brothers and sisters. That's another important point, brothers and sisters, because these police get fired from one state, go to another. These police get fired from one police district, go to another. These police get fired from one county and they go to another county. So it's not enough, you understand, to fire them. You must make it illegal and impossible for the racist cop to be hired anywhere else. Being fired from one district, being fired from one police precinct is the same as being fired from all police precincts. Being fired from one police precinct is the same as being fired from all police precincts. Being fired from one police precinct is the same as being fired from all police precincts. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And turn off that body cam, automatically charged with obstruction of justice. Your ass goes to jail. Turn off the body cam and you're automatically charged with felonious obstruction of justice. We must do that. I'm going to get attitude. That's kind of weak. Next, require federal police vehicles to be equipped with dashboard cameras. There we go again. Next, require state and local law enforcement agencies that receive federal funding to ensure the use of body-worn and dashboard cameras. Restrict the transfer of military equipment to the police. Restrict the transfer of military equipment to the police. Now this right here we go again with that word restrict. Here we go again with that word restrict. How about eliminate the transfer of military equipment to the police? How about eliminate the transfer of military equipment to the police? But here's my point. They're not going to do that because inner city police in the black community already have an abundance of military grade weapons and equipment. The police in the black community already have an abundance of military grade weapons and equipment. So there's no, even if they stopped, they already have enough of that because they've been getting it since Lyndon Baines Johnson, 1968, passed the Federal Police Assistance Act. So they've been getting equipment from the police since Dr. King's murder. So talking about you going to restrict it is nonsense. Eliminate it. Say no more military equipment to be sent to police districts in the black community. So I'm going to give you a 0 on that because you're not being honest. Next, requires state and local law enforcement agencies to adopt anti-discrimination policies and training programs, including those targeted at fighting racial profiling. Wait a minute now. Let me read this again because I got a problem with this. Requires state and local law enforcement agencies that receive federal funding to adopt anti-discrimination policies and training programs, including those targeted at fighting racial profiling. I have a problem with this. Do y'all want to know why I have a problem with this? The reason I have a problem with this, brothers and sisters, why is it not illegal for the police to not have anti-discrimination policies and training programs? Isn't that required under the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law? So you're telling me that the police do not already have anti-discrimination policies and training programs? You're just now making that a requirement in 2022? That's not acceptable. That is not acceptable. Or are you just regurgitating something that already exists because you can't think of enough nonsense to fluff up this bill? Because if you're telling me you're just now requiring anti-discrimination policies in the police district, I can't respect that. I can't respect that. Next, prohibit federal police officers from using chokehold or other carotid holds, which led to the death of Eric Garner, and require state and local law enforcement agencies that receive federal funding to adopt the same prohibition. Why can't the chokehold be made illegal across the board for police in the United States? See, I don't like this conditionality. I don't like this conditionality. I don't like the conditionality of these provisions in the George Floyd anti-lynching bill. You're saying federal police, but you're not saying state and local. You're saying state and local, if they get the money, they have to adopt a no chokehold approach. But what I'm saying is whether they get federal money or not, the chokehold should be illegal, period. Why do you keep making it conditional? Why are you making these provisions conditional? You get a 0 on that. Next one. Prohibit the issuance of no-knock warrants. Prohibit the issuance of no-knock warrants. Prohibit the issuance of no-knock warrants that allow police to conduct a raid without knocking or announcing themselves in federal drug investigations, and provide incentives to the states to enact a similar prohibition. Did y'all hear the tricknology in that? Did y'all hear the tricknology? I'm going to read it again, and I want you to listen to see if you can pick up the tricknology in what I just read. Listen to that. Look how they play with the words. Prohibit the issuance of no-knock warrants in federal drug investigations, and provide incentives to the states to enact a similar prohibition. Here's the problem with that. Number one, why is it only for drug investigations? Why is it only for drug investigations? No-knock warrant should be no-knock warrant across the whole board. No-knock warrants should be made illegal, just like the chokehold, across the board. No-knock warrants should be made illegal across the board. Why are you only saying for the purposes of a drug investigation? That's number one. And then number two, you say provide incentives to the states to enact a similar prohibition. Why are the states not being required to eliminate no-knock warrants? Why are you providing incentives? The fact that you are providing an incentive means it's not mandatory. The fact that you are providing an incentive means that it's not mandatory. The fact that you are providing an incentive means that it is not mandatory, brothers and sisters. Do you understand that? This is weak as hell. I thought the George Floyd police bill eliminated no-knock warrants across the board, federal, state, and local police. I thought it eliminated it. This does not eliminate. This says only for drug investigations on the federal level, and we will try to convince the states to do the same thing by giving them incentives. We don't want no damn incentives. Eric Garner lost his life due to that, a chokehold. Amir Pope in Minnesota lost his life due to a no-knock warrant. Breonna Taylor lost her life due to a no-knock warrant. And you're talking about you're not going to eliminate them? Only on the federal level? But you're not going to make the states do it? That's zero. This bill is starting to smell like. This bill is starting to stink real bad. Congressional Black Caucus. Congressional Black Caucus. You tell Nancy Pelosi. You tell Nancy Pelosi this ain't it. Black America is not comfortable with this. Let me finish. We got two more. Changes the threshold. Amir Locke. Changes the threshold for the permissible use of force by federal law enforcement from reasonableness to only when necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury. Changes the threshold for the permissible use of force by federal law enforcement officers from reasonableness to only when necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury. That's not clear enough for me. The language is not clear enough for me. They're saying the threshold for the use of force by federal law enforcement officers is reasonableness. Was it reasonably justified? They want to change that to using force only when necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury. That still leaves too much room for interpretation. That still leaves too much room for interpretation. And the last one, mandate that federal officers use deadly force only as a last resort and that de-escalation be attempted, and condition federal funding to state and local law enforcement on the adoption of the same. Let me read that again. Mandate that federal officers use deadly force only as a last resort and that de-escalation be attempted, and condition federal funding to state and local law enforcement on the adoption of the same. Here's the problem I have with that. Number one, why do you keep using this language that says if you get federal money, you must follow the rule? They should follow the rule whether they get money or not. We need these provisions to be universal. Federal, state, local, whether they get federal funds or not means nothing because we're talking about saving black life. So that's number one. So that's number one. And then in addition to that, why is deadly force already not requiring? Why doesn't the use of deadly force already? Why is it not already requiring de-escalation attempts and only being used as a last resort? Why are you requiring that now? They're saying they're going to require the use of deadly force as a last resort. They're saying they're going to require the use of deadly force as a last resort. I'm saying, why is it not already a last resort? So you're saying up until now, police can use deadly force whenever they feel like it? Are you saying up until now, police can use deadly force whenever they feel like it? Because this is saying mandated as a last resort. Why is it not already a last resort? Why is it not already a last resort? And why doesn't the law already require de-escalation procedures? That's whack. That's whack. That bill is weak. And that bill tells me, I hope the Emmett Till bill is not that weak. I hope when I read the Emmett Till bill, and I'm going to go over it with you, brothers and sisters. I'm going to go over it with you, brothers and sisters. I hope the Emmett Till bill is not as weak as the George Floyd bill. I hope the Emmett Till bill is not as weak as the George Floyd bill. I hope the Emmett Till bill is not as weak as the George Floyd bill. This is very weak. This is very weak. So Nancy Pelosi, this is the best thing you could come up with after the George Floyd protests for justice. The most comprehensive social protest in America since the Dr. King assassination protest and the 1967 riots that swept America. And this is the best you could come up with. You know why this is the best they can come up with? Because when we had the George Floyd protests for justice all across America, when we had the George Floyd protests for justice all across America, we integrated the march. We turned it into a multicultural movement. Mistake number one. Mistake number two, there was no identified leadership or representation. And number three, there were no clearly articulated demands. And because the George Floyd protests did not have no clearly articulated demands, and because the George Floyd protests did not have official leadership or representation, anybody who wanted to speak could speak. So there was no unity of message. There was no unity of message during the George Floyd protests. And lastly, we integrated the damn protests. So the protest was exploited by every other group for their own personal agenda. We still haven't learned to struggle by ourselves. And that's why this weak-ass George Floyd bill, I want to say, I don't care if it gets passed or not. That's what I want to say. I want to say I don't care if it gets passed or not, but I want to be responsible. The no-knock warrants, we can use that. But the problem is it's only on the federal level involving drug investigations. The elimination of the chokehold, we can use that. But it's only federal, and they'll give incentives to the state and local agencies as to whether or not they want to use it. So this is weak. I hope the Emmett Till bill is not this weak. Let me tell you what's missing. Police can be charged with hate crimes. Police can be charged with the lynching bill. Police can be charged with federal hate crimes. Police can be charged with federal lynching. Add that to this. Police are not protected if what they do is done out of hate or if what they do is done as a lynching. Add that to the bill. There are no police protections for hate crimes and for lynchings. Add that to the bill. I see nothing in here about increasing the amount of black police who come from the city that they are policing. I don't see anything in this bill about increasing the amount, not minorities, not people of color, not diversity. I see nothing about increasing the amount of black police who come from the cities that they are policing. I also don't see nothing in here about no hiring of non-African police who are ex-military ex-mercenary, ex-hate group, added in their Congressional Black Caucus, added in their Congressional Black Caucus. No non-Africans can work in a black community if they are military, ex-military, mercenary, or hate group. Make it a requirement. I also don't see nothing about a civilian review board. I don't see anything in there about that. And I don't see anything in here about eliminating the right of police to have their trials paid for by the people whose community they are terrorizing. Why are we paying police bills to defend them in court after they murdered Sandra Bland? Why are the people paying the police attorney fees after they killed Eric Garner and Tamir Rice? Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Amir Locke. Put it in there that when police are indicted, they must provide for their own criminal defense. If the Fraternal Order of Police wants to help them, they can help them, but they will not have their trial paid for by the people. They just kicked me off of Instagram. So for my Facebook family, I just want to say, I'm not happy with what I see in the George Floyd police bill. The Emmett Till bill, we're going to look at it and see what it says. I hope it's not as weak as the George Floyd bill. And we're going to see what happens. I'm dealing with a little cold right now. I wish I had some homemade chicken noodle soup. I'm dealing with a little cold right now. I wish I had some homemade chicken noodle soup. But if you want to be a part of the Bishop Turner National Independent Black Political Movement, if you want to run or if you want to help people win, if you want to run yourself or if you want to help people win, send me an email, btnibpm@yahoo.com, btnibpm@yahoo.com. If you need to reach me by text message, 215-989-9858, 215-989-9858, 215-989-9858. I need some TLC right now, some chicken noodle soup, some ginger, some tea. I need some TLC. This is the Prince of Pan-Africanism signing out. We must unite. We must stand together. We must organize. And most of all, we must fight. Good night, brothers and sisters. Peace and Pan-Africanism.